Case number 12. Let's look for the identity that is equivalent to the entire expression of cosine rho plus the product of sine squared rho and secant rho. In order for us to look for the identity which is equivalent to this entire expression, only one of the three can be expressed with the other. It's the secant rho. We can express secant rho in terms of cosine rho because it is its reciprocal. That would mean, let's try to copy the first identity. It's still cosine rho plus sine squared is still sine squared rho. And then we change secant, take note it's a product, into its reciprocal because secant is actually the reciprocal of cosine rho. After this, we're just going to combine all the expressions here and probably, hopefully, come up with a singular or a combination of other identities which is easier and simpler than the given. Let us try to multiply the second term. So the first term is still cosine rho. And don't forget that this is all over 1. So when you multiply that, you still have sine squared rho as your numerator, and your denominator is cosine of rho. Don't forget that you cannot do this because the cosine rho is actually separated by this expression in terms of addition, and cancellation law can only work for cancellation law under multiplication. Now, what we could do here is to combine them into one rational expression. Again, notice that this is all over 1, and for that we are going to look for LCD. Whenever we have a term with denominator 1, the LCD is automatically the other denominator. So our LCD is cosine rho. And we're going to do this process. Cosine rho divided by 1 is cosine rho. Multiply that to another cosine rho. So you will have the square of cosine rho or cosine squared of rho plus, when you divide cosine rho to this cosine rho, that's just 1. That would mean the the numerator of sine squared rho is just the same. Let us try to continue and move it here. We still have one more step, as we are going to acknowledge that the sum of cosine squared rho and sine squared rho is just equal to the identity which is 1. This is true for for both cosine squared and sine squared under the same angle. So if this is theta, this is also theta, that's still 1. If this is alpha and this is alpha, that's still 1. If this is x, that's still 1. That would mean the sum of the cosine squared and the sine squared, or even sine squared plus cosine squared of the same angle, automatically equates to 1. Our denominator is still cosine rho. And we know that this is equivalent to one of the 6 trigonometric identities. Automatically, 1 over cosine rho is simply secant rho. In short, the identity equivalent to the expression cosine rho plus the product of sine squared rho and secant rho is simply secant rho. This case for missing identity is now closed. If you may, to be ready for some new cases, subscribe now.